Good afternoon, I'm Kate Adak. This is Ontario Today. In this hour, as Ontario faces increasingly intense rainfalls, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995.
More than 75 millimeters of rain fell in a 6-hour period, and floodwaters rose to nearly a meter in some areas. That was high enough to turn busy roads into canals and backyards into lakes. Some drivers were forced to just abandon their cars in the middle of the street.
Came up over the sidewalk.
Water was probably up to about right here. And then every time cars would be coming down the street, they'd be creating these waves, so the water would come in even further.
Last week, a thunderstorm brought heavy rain, power outages, and flooding to parts of Ottawa. And we know intense rainfall in recent years has impacted millions across the province.
An intense storm brought flash floods that left many waterlogged and stranded.
We're in a neighborhood in downtown Toronto called Liberty Village. There are a lot of condo buildings around here and then a lot of businesses as well. And we know some residents here affected by that heavy downpour.
It was devastating.
On Turner Road, every lawn a junkyard after Windsor's worst flooding disaster.
I mean, the water was up to my knees. The sofas were floating, and I really felt helpless.
We're on 3.5 days of no power. We're all crying out here. We're not the only ones, though, in Windsor.
With extreme weather events becoming more common, cities are working to upgrade their infrastructure and create better systems for drainage. Those fixes can't come fast enough. Remember when 2 men in Toronto were trapped in an elevator as floodwaters poured in? In 2018, the pair found themselves locked in an elevator that was quickly filling with water, and they tried frantically to escape.
The water was very quickly getting to our neckline, and I think by the time that we were able to get a hold of an emergency person, the water was above all of the elevator buttons. We're afraid that we were going to die. We're not going to make it through. The water is continuing to come in. We're stuck on the elevator at the basement level.
That summer, Toronto saw a massive, rapid dump of rain. The area of the city where the men were trapped is called Black Creek, and it's been described as a concrete ditch where excess water is bound to accumulate.
All the areas that drain into Black Creek are essentially roofs or concrete or pavement of roads. So where rain sort of before that area was developed would have percolated into the ground or been taken up by plants. Now basically every drop of rain that falls eventually turns into floodwater.
That concrete problem, a lack of absorption, has planners considering more natural solutions. Even one with a playful name, the Sponge City.
When we build cities, we're replacing a lot of natural areas with artificial surfaces like roads, rooftops, and this affects the water cycle. Naturally, if it rains, the water might go below the surface, but when we seal the surface, it stays on top and it can quickly move into other areas, causing floods. The concept of a sponge city is to basically try and mimic this natural behavior that we've taken away from our cities.
Introducing green areas, green roofs, rain gardens, vegetation that can help soak up water the way a sponge does during rain events. That's one of multiple strategies to mitigate some of the fast flooding of heavy rainfall. And today we're asking you, as Ontario sees heavier, more intense rain, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. Our question again is, as Ontario sees more intense, heavy rain, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. Now, with us for the full hour is Paul Kovacs. He's the Executive Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at the University of Western Ontario. He's an expert on disaster resilience and adaptation to climate change and has been a long-time contributing author to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Good afternoon, Paul.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for the opportunity.
I understand you live in Georgetown area between Guelph and Brampton?
That's correct.
What kind of rainfall have you seen there this summer?
It's been quite a year for heavy rainfall all across Ontario, including where I live. We have not had the basement flooding some other communities have had, but we've had a lot of rain. One of the things my family likes to do is that we have the Credit River here, and we were in our inflatable rafts and floating down the river because the river levels are particularly high this year. And the water level, and it was quite warm. So it was nice on the weekend to take the family for a nice float down the river.
Okay, so you were able to float down the river.
We were.
Okay. Well, that's nice to hear some levity here, but we're obviously going to be chatting with communities that have really been struggling with having too much water pouring down and the sort of sudden rainfalls that we've been seeing. We're going to chat in the second half hour, a little later in the show, with the former mayor of Stratford, and he's going to talk about the strategies there in that city of what they've been doing to protect against extreme rain events. That's some of what they had. It was 20 years ago. You've been studying cases for a long time now of what cities have done to adapt. I'm wondering how much more frequent have these rain events been?
We get about $1 billion a year of preventable damage from extreme rainfall here in Ontario. $1 billion that we can avoid. This is 20, 30 times higher than it was in the 1970s. So losses have been increasing. Our research at the university finds that about half of the actions to better prepare for the extreme rainfall we're going to see more of in the future is the responsibility of municipal governments. They have to change the systems, the sewer systems, the drainage systems, and about half of it is the individual property owners. You can adjust your own home, your own property, so you're better prepared. So there's action required both by the community and by the individual homeowners.
Can you tell me a bit more about what homeowners can do?
So if anybody comes to the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction, we have a brochure that we're hopefully you'll find on our website on basement flood, and we have a dedicated website on basement flood reduction, including a number of videos that people can pick up. To simplify what fits into a longer report, there's 3 actions we recommend for most homeowners in most urban areas across Ontario. One is that when it rains really, really hard, the municipal sewers can fill up with rainwater, and that rainwater can start pushing back toward your home. Normally, when you flush the toilet or water goes down the sink, you want it to leave your home. But when there's a heavy rain event, this rainwater starts pushing toward your home. So you should install a backwater valve. A backwater valve will automatically float up and close if water starts coming toward your house, but it gets out of the way when water is leaving your home. So a backwater valve is one of the 3 items we recommend. The second is if water does get into your basement, it can do $30,000 or $40,000 worth of damage. But you can minimize that damage if you get that water out as quickly as possible. So most homes at risk, most basements should have a sump pump. And those sump pumps don't really help if there happens to be a storm when the power goes out. So having a sump pump and with a power supply that'll work even if the electricity happens to go out. And the third recommendation we have is you don't want water to build up during a rain event next to your home. So if you can landscape your home so there's a gentle slope that goes away from the home so that rain doesn't accumulate next to the home, instead it moves out onto the lawn or elsewhere, the driveway, then you are less likely to have damage. So a backwater valve, a sump pump, and drainage to take the water away from the side of your home.
Drainage, that was the gentle slope you were referring to.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Well, we have Lee on the line from Wyerton. Hi, Lee.
Hi.
What have you done to adapt to the extreme rain?
We did a home renovation and we put in permeable paving. So it's called Eco-Raster, and it's kind of a recycled plastic product from Purist Plastics in Listowel, Ontario. And what it does is it, with a bit of prep and a bit of a basin underneath, stone and basically stone underneath, you create a bit of a bathtub around your house, and you can move water on the grade to keep it out of your basement.
How has it been going for you?
Yeah, we have it on the patio and the driveway. In the driveway, we actually made it look really decorative with some grass and some pollinator mix. So it's like a real green driveway. So that's going. That's pretty fun, and it's pretty eco-friendly. But in the patio, it's just pea gravel, and because all of our rain that comes off the roof of the house in the east trough and the down, just pour right into it. You don't even need like a rain bed.
Lee, I'm wondering, what are you? I'm not sure entirely if we've got a strong line, but if you can hear me, Lee, what motivated you to want to install this?
until heavier damage in Byerton. But actually, one of the interesting things is they have tenants in our driveway.
You know what? I'm struggling to hear you. I'm so sorry. And I guess if I'm struggling, probably other listeners are as well. We can just, we'll hopefully try to be able to reconnect to that. But Paul, when you heard Lee just now talking about the permeable paving, what stood out to you? Have you heard about that before?
I'm super excited. I think that's a great way to go for a lot of people. My home, I have a gravel drive to get from the street to my garage. I chose not to pave my drive. And, people say it'll be a little harder to clean the snow in the winter, but it hasn't been harder at all. And it leaves that greater permeability, that place for the water to go and absorb into the ground. One of the things that we're observing, and we've been celebrating in our work at the university, we have a series of 100 case studies of communities doing good things. We call that Cities Adapt, Celebrating Local Leadership, and that's all available to anybody who'd like to read them, including community decision makers. And Kitchener-Waterloo is the first community in Canada that started to give financial tax incentives to people like Lee. So people in the community of Kitchener-Waterloo, if you keep more permeable surface, you avoid paving over surfaces on your property, businesses and homeowners, then you pay less tax. And people who pave over more of the surfaces, when the rain falls, that water has to go somewhere. And if it can't get into the ground because it's paved over, it goes to the neighbor. It goes to the city sewer system. And so they pay more taxes. And after Kitchener-Waterloo did it first, and we wrote about it to others, I think there's a growing list of communities across Ontario that have started to bring in a permeable surface tax to encourage the kind of actions that Lee has taken.
How have you seen it work? So like the higher taxes for those who have the concrete driveway, or the paved driveway, but how many people are taking it? Do you have a sense of the uptake? Because I wonder if sometimes people, are just think I'll just pay a higher tax or I'll pay more. What have you seen in terms of the change?
I certainly saw with my daughter as she was reflecting on what to do with her own property. She had a gravel drive like we had and was thinking about paving it, and she chose not to. And the tax system just provides one more signal of better, greener practices. Not all communities have this approach yet, but I think it'll be more common over time to have this as one of many signals that municipalities can give back to homeowners. It's your drive, it's your patio, and Lee was describing what he chose to do on his property. But the tax system can bring some of these community values to encourage people to think about the greener solutions.
Okay. David is on the line from Kingston. Hi, David.
Hi, how you doing?
Hi. I'm wondering how you have adapted in your life with the intense heavy rain.
So I'm in the process of finishing my house build, and we decided to build a slab-on-grade house, so we don't have a basement. And that's something I don't know why more builders don't do or think about, because essentially we've just eliminated the largest portion of flood risk to our house by not having a basement.
And so how long have you been in Kingston?
I've been in Kingston since 2014. I actually own a foundation and waterproofing business, so I see quite a bit of the damage your expert's talking about. And when you look at the damage to a basement, or even just the energy it takes to heat a basement, or the inefficiency in it, when I was building, I looked around for an engineer that was able to design a slab-on-grade foundation that will work my site and not even have a basement. So we built 2 stories up as opposed to like a bungalow with a basement.
Oh, so for those who don't know, but I'm starting to envision this, if there's no basement, this is a foundation that the house is built upon.
Yeah, so the first floor of the house is concrete. It's going to be about 10 inches above grade when you walk into it. And yeah, there is absolutely no basement in it.
And what have you seen? You've been in Kingston for a while. When it comes to the rain, can you give me a sense of what rainfall has been like in that area, and how this 10 inches has helped?
We don't have anything below grade at our house. So, every year I say this is the worst rain I've ever seen this year. I go in and I put sump pits in and fix people's leaking basements. And every year it seems to get worse. So like I say, I've eliminated that in my house because there is nothing to flood. Like literally the water would have to be above 10 inches high in my entire property to flood into the main floor. And we're kind of on a little hill. So, if my house is flooding, the entire Kingston's underwater.
Because you've already got the built-in drainage in a way. Okay. Well, thank you, David, for calling. Paul, I'm wondering what you're thinking. And before I go into that, I'll just remind listeners, we're reacting to the intense heavy rain that we've been seeing across the province and, of course, across the country and the world. But in this province, we're wondering how you're adapting. And our phone number again is 1-888-817-8995. We're looking for, as we heard from homeowners who've made some changes to their properties, and as well cities and communities who've implemented, as Paul had mentioned earlier, tax systems, different types of strategies. And I'll throw out, if you take exception to the question, maybe you're thinking, hey, I shouldn't change anything at all. I'd be curious to hear from you. 1-888-817-8995. Paul, I'm wondering what you're thinking when you heard about David there in Kingston.
Kate, I think what David was bringing to the conversation is a really important element here. The enormous majority of the homes in Canada have a basement. The basement use is widely varied across the country. In the earliest of time, basements were put in place just maybe as some storage, and it was not certainly a finished area that was seen as a livable space. It was just part of the construction process. The reason why basements are so common in our country is that it's a cold country, and the winter frost and others that get down into the ground and affect the freezing and thaw every year under your home. The one of the proven ways of building in a cold climate is to have a basement with its deep foundation. And in our country, most foundations to get down deep enough with the very deep cold that can happen in the wintertime required us to be down far enough that you could actually use that as a space that you could walk around in and over time adapt and do other things other than just some basic storage down there. So basements are extremely common in our country, whereas in other parts of the world, closer to the equator and warmer areas, even most of the southern part of the United States, it is very, very common to not have any basement at all. But because of our cold climates, most do. I heard David use a lot of words there about carefully doing this properly and understanding how to do it right for where he lives. I think he was describing that as the Kingston area. It does get cold in the winter in Kingston, so he's done all the right steps. He talked what I thought I heard about a very thick foundation slab that he was putting down. So this is definitely a new option. In warming, there are some parts of our country, not in Ontario, but out in Victoria, where it's fairly warm right through the winter time, and some new building techniques are coming in there. And maybe a little further down the road, maybe in the Windsor area and some of the places across Ontario that's not quite as cold in the winter, we may see more of these innovations coming and become a little more mainstream. What David's doing is absolutely a safe way to avoid all basement flooding, to not have a basement at all. To do it properly requires proper engineering. And I heard David saying he had gone through that process, but it's not the norm. It's not easy for everyone to do in new construction, but I think it will probably emerge over the next 10, 20 years.
Well, we're asking today on Ontario Today, as we see more intense and heavy rain, like in Ottawa last week, like in Toronto and Windsor in recent years, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. We have Angie on the line in Barrie. Hi, Angie.
Hi.
How long have you been in Barrie?
I've been in Barrie 20 years.
Okay. And how have things changed for you when you look out the window or when you're outside in this?
Well, I when I was listening to your previous caller who has, an on-grade home, one of the important things when I bought my house 20 years ago was, yes, I have a raised bungalow. I walk in from my garage and then, stairs up to my living area, but all of my house is above grade. So I don't have a sump pump. I don't have to worry about anything like that. And I know when it rains heavily, my neighbor's sump pump, basically goes nonstop. So that was one of the important things for me many years ago was I just didn't want a house with a basement because I just didn't want a house with a basement. So I'm very happy with, my home, and I don't have any issues.
Okay, interesting that you were, that was a criteria when you were looking for your home originally 2 decades ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I wasn't really thinking about it like as that the main purpose when I bought the home. But, I thought, at a very young age, because I'm a lot older now, as I age, I want to be able to have access to my home from, one level. So even when I walk out at the back, I've built a nice deck with access, to our pool, and even everything will be accessible even as I age. So I think it's just because of my background, what I do for a living. I'm a nurse, so I thought as I get older, I want to make sure that, my home is always going to be accessible for me, and that's why I bought the home.
Well, I'm glad you're having good luck there, Angie. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you for your time.
And we've got Mike in Kitchener. Hi, Mike.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi, okay, it's okay. How are you adapting, and what made you want to call?
Well, I'm a plumber with 35 years experience, so I've installed several backwater valves in homes. Just getting back to the backwater valve, it's not something that your typical homeowner could approach or try because you have to smash up the concrete to install it. That's not something your typical homeowner's willing to even, well, some of them try, I suppose, but it could be a catastrophe. But you gotta have a licensed plumber to do something like that, just to make sure you do not have a disaster. Because often the main water line to the home is right beside the sewer, and if you drive a jackhammer through that, you're in a big problem.
Okay.
You'll have a major flood out of control until you can get the city to come turn the water off. So you got to have a plumber that knows his stuff, and be prepared to have the concrete around in the basement in an area where the sewer leaves the house. That area is going to be dug up.
And is that, Mike, as a plumber, have you been seeing people asking for backwater valves?
In the past, usually it's after there's been a disaster, is when they go, oh, yeah, we got to put one of these in because the whole basement filled up with sewage. But overall, no, you don't see people phoning and saying, hey, I want to put a backwater valve in. It's not mandatory. In the city of Kitchener, they don't enforce it. It's easily a bylaw change, which would just say, okay, from now on, all new homes have to have backwater valves. And they work. They stop the rainwater. When the rainwater pours in, gets into the sanitary, and it backs up, they instantly close when they fill, and that's it. They hold the water back, and you don't have your house full of all your neighbor's sewage. It's pretty horrible.
Okay, well, thank you for calling, Mike. It's Mike in Kitchener, and we've heard a couple ideas there coming out of the Kitchener region. Our guest today is Paul Kovacs. He's the Executive Director of the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at the University of Western Ontario. And we're asking today, as Ontario sees heavier, more intense rain, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. Paul, we've got only 30 seconds, but I'm wondering if you want to react there to Mike's question, or Mike's suggestion.
Yeah, if I do a quick 30-second reaction. First to David and Angie, here are two homeowners that are thinking ahead, and I love that. This is building new. When they first buy, they know what they're looking for. In their case, they chose not to have a basement at all, but they're thinking ahead. I really encourage that mindset.
Okay.
Mike include the words, they work. Backwater valves, if you do have a basement, they work.
Okay, we'll be right back. You're listening to Ontario Today. I'm Kate Adack. As Ontario sees heavier, more intense rain, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995.
This morning's heavy rain has caused some flooded roads in the GTA, particularly on the 401.
Some residents of the condo buildings around here posting video on social media of water pouring in through the ceilings, into the hallways. And
now, like the rest of the basement, it's covered in dirty sewage water.
Within minutes, my whole basement was flooded.
According to Environment and Climate Change Canada, it's not your imagination. We are getting heavier, more intense rain, and climate change is the main culprit.
So we're finding that in North America, we have seen an increase in the frequency and severity of heavy rainfall events. And this is largely due to global warming.
The rain is changing our cities, our homes, and our lifestyles. Today we're asking you, how are you adapting?
My husband and I do actively commute, so we bike. So there have been times where, it's 4 o'clock and I'm at work and then it's like, oh my goodness, it's a complete downpour. Okay, I guess I'm just going to have to wait it out.
Yeah.
But yeah, my husband, he's a trooper. He's geared up now. He's got full on rain gear and he's still going hard on his bike. But yes, we do have to adapt.
Heavier rain is a real challenge in cities. Paved roads, concrete parking lots, dense urban living all concentrates water that often runs into places it shouldn't. The idea of creating sponge cities, or more absorbent urban areas, is spreading.
The concept of a sponge city is to basically try and mimic this natural behavior that we've taken away from our cities.
Sponge city plans include the use of permeable asphalt, building new canals and ponds, and restoring wetlands.
In a moment, we'll hear what Stratford, Ontario did in an unprecedented rainstorm 20 years ago, and how the city became a leader in basement flood prevention. And we want to hear from you. Have you had to change your home to prevent water or sewage from flooding in? Are you changing how you camp, how you commute, how you work because of intense rain? As Ontario sees heavier, more severe rainstorms, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. And our question again, as Ontario sees heavier, more intense rain, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. Now, joining us now is Dan Matheson. He served as mayor of Stratford, Ontario for 2 decades until just last year. And back in 2002, Stratford experienced an unprecedented rainstorm, and Dan helped oversee the city's response and its creation of a citywide storm system master plan. Dan Matheson's now a municipal advisor and an executive in residence for the Ivey School of Business, and he joins us this afternoon. Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon. Great to be with you.
Take us back to July of 2002. What happened in Stratford?
Well, on July 28, 2002, overnight, we received about 150 millimeters or 6 inches of rain within about a 6-hour period. And what had happened is we had about 1,000 to 1,200 homes in a city of 12,000 homes have some form of flooding in their basements. Some of them were on the old dual sewer system of storm and sanitary being combined. That led to sewage water in basements. Other ones just had backup of their storm sewers because they had rainwater leaders and not large enough storm sewers to take the water away.
And you were the deputy mayor then?
Yeah, I was the deputy mayor. I was actually acting mayor at the time as our mayor was on vacation, and I received a call from our public works staff sometime around 3:30 in the morning to say that there was flooding in some homes in the city of Stratford. Got up to get a sense of what it was, and within an hour or two, and as sunlight came and daybreak, we started to realize the magnitude of the situation and quickly realized that a certain area of the city that had been designed to a standard that wasn't applicable or even tolerant to it had massive flooding occurring. And it became a real recovery issue, first to deal with the aftermath of the damage to people's homes, but then, really to figure out how we chart our path forward. And it set us up for a long and arduous and expensive infrastructure.
What did you recognize was poorly designed?
Well, at the time, there was prevailing ideas 2 generations ago in engineering that said combining sewers was a great efficient way to take water. We also thought it was great that when you had your eaves trough connected right into your weeping tile and your downspouts in, that would help take the water away. It taught us that, no, there's a lot of problems with that. First of all, the sewer capacity in combined storm and sanitary is not enough. They were designed at 20-year storms, 50-year storms back then. That's not enough. Putting extra rainwater into the sewer system was not a good idea. We should be displacing it out onto lawns and properties using natural water flow as a way to deal with it. We had to look at what our storm sewer system was and whether stormwater ponds were a good solution for us, and eventually they were. And we went on this massive master planning exercise designing what the community is going to look like, not in 2003 to 2010, but what it was going to be like in 15, 20 years where we are now and beyond of what we needed for storm sewer capacity.
And what does it look like now in terms of what actions the city took?
So the city at that time, a lot of people were saying, well, design for a 100-year storm or a 150-year storm, because people thought that if you went to a 200 or a 250-year storm, as in the way we did, that was going to push up the cost. Well, we quickly learned that adding that 100 years or 150-year design standard was actually only a 15 or 20% delta. And that was probably better and looked upon that we were actually thinking more into the future what climate change was going to be like. And that's what we started to do. And we had to get people to think about the fact that it's not very glamorous or sexy to open up a stormwater pond or to dig up streets and replace one pipe with two. But we had to do those things. We also had to work with our residents and say, look, we're going to incentivize you. We're going to give you a grant to put a backflow preventer in your basement drain so that water can't come back up. We're also going to incentivize you, and we're going to pass a bylaw making it law that you have to disconnect your stormwater rain leaders off your house from your weeping tile. And we did a number of those things, and we encouraged people to change the topography of their ground in their own homes so they could displace the water on their own property. And it was against the law to displace your water onto your neighbor's property. So we started to deal with a lot of those issues.
What do you think other cities should be hearing from this and learning from this?
Well, I would say this. City of Stratford at that time was 30 to 32,000 people. We spent $250 million in the ensuing 10 years after that flood. Only $36.5 million of it came from the senior levels of government. The other $66.5 million was then debt financed, and $150 million came from our tax levy and ancillary sewer fees. It's expensive. Putting that problem off does not solve anything. It just becomes more expensive. Stratford had flooding in the 80s. They had them again in the 90s. And we had that massive flooding in the early 2000s that was the clarion call for us to get ambitious and aggressive on how to deal with it. And we did. Municipalities today need to realize you only have so much infrastructure money, and you need to spend the right amount on the right solution or the best long-term solution on day one, which is today.
How long did it take for a lot of the changes you made? I mean, you mentioned stormwater ponds, for example, and we're talking about 20 years. How quickly were you able to bring in these changes?
Well, we started within 18 months of the initial storm. We had all the ministry approvals, and we started making a number of the changes. It took us 10 years to say we were about 70% complete. It took us another 6 or 7 years after that to say we were 85 to 90% complete. And my last year office last year, we just completed the last piece of the major infrastructure puzzle that was part of that storm sewer master plan. So that was 20 years from the day of the flood. And that shows you, with precious resources, money not being at endless amounts, that it does take time to make those really strong strategic infrastructure decisions that are going to have profound positive impacts on your community for the future.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your experience in Stratford, Dan.
Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Dan Matheson is the former mayor of Stratford, and during his first years as mayor, he oversaw the city's response to a major flooding event there back in the early 2000s. We've got Paul Kovacs on the line. He leads the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at Western University, and he's joining me. And we're going to take some calls. We're asking, as Ontario sees more intense, heavy rain, how are you adapting? 1-888-817-8995. I want to ask you, Paul, quickly, what you were hearing from Dan just there, and how many municipalities, do you have a sense of how many other places need to be catching up, and how many are undergoing these kinds of efforts?
Thank you, Kate. It was really great to hear Dan share the Stratford experience. In our Celebrating Local Leadership case studies, Stratford's story is one of the stories we tell. That when they experienced the terrible event in 2002, where 10% of the population had water in their basements and extensive damage. This was responded to by the mayor and council with a long-term commitment to do the right thing. The science was shared about here's what most communities are doing, and they said we're going to go beyond that. We're going to do better. Here's how much water usually flows through the sewer system. We're going to go 15% beyond that. It'll cost us more, but we need to do the right thing. We want to plan ahead. We've had this problem in the past, and we want to do what's right. They also committed to a multi-dimensional strategy, offering incentives to homeowners to put in backwater valves so the homeowners themselves could act, fixing the sewer systems, having storm ponds where the water could go to, and setting out a plan that would take 10 or 20 years to complete. This was a very bold initiative. We're aware of 30 different communities across Ontario that offer incentives that are starting down this sort of path. This is a sign of just how widespread the issue of extreme rainfall threatening damage to homes is across Ontario, that we've already got 30 communities that have had enough and are starting to offer the financial incentive to homeowners who choose to act. As our caller Mike called in, you need a professional plumber to put this in place, and the city will cover a major part of that cost. If you know you want to protect your home, you bring in the professional, you get the municipal support to start down that path to protect yourself. This is a real problem that's growing. We've got more and more communities that are aware. Most of them, part of Dan's story, it's triggered by a loss. It'd be really exciting if we were ahead of the game and we were doing all of this before the next storm comes and before the damage. But we've had so many communities across Ontario that have had the big loss. Parts of this is in place. I look forward to even more of these positive stories that Stratford has done becoming embedded over time.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes these big losses happen more than once for people. Dan was referring to Stratford having had flooding in the 80s and in the 90s, so it was not the first time. And we have a caller on the line who I believe has had some trouble in their basement multiple times, perhaps. Joanne, are you there?
Yes, I am.
What was your experience?
My experience was we have a rural property outside of Ottawa in Hammond, and we have a sump pump. We're not on municipal sewage, but we are on municipal water. But we were flooding. We were getting a little bit of water with the snow melt and with rain and everything else, and it got progressively worse. And one year, finally, we had a pretty significant flood. We had to tear out our basement. It was covered by insurance. We had our basement refinished, and then it happened again, and we tore out our basement, but that time we didn't claim it on the insurance. Then we had someone come in and change the weeping tile, dig around the house, seal up the foundation, and that sort of worked for a bit, and then we flooded again, and we finally bit the bullet in 2012 and raised our house by over 5 feet. So they put it up on cribs. They poured in, I think it was 300 tons of gravel or something, laid a new basement floor and raised the house. And we were at a stage where if we left home and there was a rainstorm, we would race home because we'd be terrified we'd have to start shop vacuuming and pumping out the basement, and we got to the point where we felt we couldn't go anywhere anymore. And now it cost us over $100,000 to do it, but at least now we don't flood, touch wood, and it gives us comfort. So I guess my message is, spend the money to fix, talk to the experts, get evaluations done, get some engineers in, and find out what you need to do, because it'll happen again, unfortunately.
Wow. And how long have you been in this safe feeling right now where you're able to actually leave?
11 years.
Okay.
And so we had it done in 2012.
There's been significant flooding in the Ottawa area in the last couple of years. But
Yes, there has. Oh, yeah, there has, for sure. And we've been fine.
Wow, okay. Well, thank you, Joanne, for telling us your story. We've got Ralph on the line in Waterloo. Hi, Ralph.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. How have you been adapting with the heavy rain?
Well, there's too much rain, and then there's the too much not rain. So I've got it sort of buffered on both ends. Mine was a case of the rebate. I get on a 2-month bill of about $55. I get $16 off, so I'm paying about $40, and part of it is attributed to the trees that I have on the property. There's a number of them into the teens, and also the fact that it's an interlock driveway, and the rain drops down and it hardly shuffles down to the road, and it doesn't run off. My neighbor has an asphalt drive, and it rains, and you just see this stream going down onto the road. So we put a small addition on the back of the house, something my wife wanted. She took care of all the visible features, and I took care of the function. At the time we were building this 12 by 14 room, I said I'd like a cistern, and Waterloo being part of the Seagram industry, they also had Canada Barrel and Keg, and I got a poly barrel from them that holds about 3,200 liters, and the eave troughs fill that, and then when it's dry, like we had last year, I just use a pump and pump that out.
So now you're talking about, or is that to help your lawn? Like
if
you're circulating that water?
It's a bit of an extensive garden. Don't worry about the lawn that much. But yeah, instead of using city water during dry times, I've got this equivalent of 800 gallons.
Okay. Well, that's okay. So I see what you mean. Sometimes too much water and sometimes too little, and you found a way around that as well. Okay. Thank you for calling, Ralph.
Okay. All right.
We've got Paul
My pleasure.
Kovacs on the line. He's with the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction. In fact, he's the executive director. It's at Western University. Paul, you heard the last two callers. What are you thinking there? We have Ralph who gets the rebate that you were talking about.
Kate, really creative. These are homeowners that are looking ahead and doing the right things for their properties. Mike shared earlier as a plumber that he's installed backwater valves, but he doesn't get enough calls. Not many people are taking these actions, despite many communities having incentive programs, etc. I'd love to see more homeowners who do take action. One of the pieces that we provide is about a dozen questions. Answer these questions, you'll know if you have a risk. And the first question is, did this happen before and you haven't done anything about it? So part of what Joanne was sharing, this had happened before and they've done something about it. And now they are much more comfortable. It was a large change that they had to make, but they now have a home that's safe and protected, and they just focus on their life and get on with it. The other part of sort of a theme I'm hearing across this, there's a lot of homeowners that are choosing and sharing their stories about what they're doing. And Dan shared that there's some communities that are stepping up and investing to protect their community. I'd love to see a bigger role from the provincial government, the federal government. Some of the consequences of water damage leads to expenses for the provinces and expenses for the federal government. And so they're part of the group that should be offering incentives and encouraging and help funding some of these practices. Dan said a little bit of senior government money came to Stratford, but not very much. And I'd like to see the senior governments more involved in financing and paying for this protective action that we're hearing today.
Okay. In helping provide the subsidies and the support to the homeowners so that they can make the changes.
Mm-hmm.
We've got Taylor on the line from Ottawa. Hi, Taylor.
Hi. Thanks a lot for that. Those comments there, Mike. I think my timing is good here because I can add to what you're saying in terms of government programs that are in place here in Ottawa. The City of Ottawa has a really good program that they've developed based on a lot of data that they've collected regarding all the issues that we're discussing here, everything from stormwater capacity being reached underground and, causing floods, damage to homeowners' properties, and, of course, sewage leaking into the Ottawa River and water supply. The City of Ottawa developed a program called Rain Ready, And it's really smart because what they've done is they've figured out that, like the plumber who's not getting enough calls, they figured out that a way to get homeowners to take action on their properties is to incentivize property enhancements in a way that works to also help manage the stormwater. So they've devised a number of strategies, from the rain barrels that were just mentioned, to natural lawns, to soak-away pits, and even permeable pavements. All of these strategies come together to transform the property into what can become a net zero runoff property, in that you can eliminate all of the water that would otherwise be going onto the street. So what the city's done is they've isolated a couple different zones, and they're offering incentives that can help cover the cost of certain activities, like converting your driveway to a permeable surface, or installing a rain garden, soakaway pit, or rain barrel. And I just think that's brilliant. And how do you come at it, Taylor? It almost sounds like you work for the city. In a way, yes. I do have an interest in helping this program to expand, because we own a contracting company in Ottawa that helps service these clients who do receive rebates. And on the other side of things, on the permeable pavement department, talking about federal funding, we actually, our company developed a permeable pavement for winter climates called PurePave. And it's actually seen a lot of uptake in the city of Ottawa, city of Toronto, for homeowners looking to make these conversions to their property. And they get the property enhancement while turning their property into net zero runoff surface all at the same time. What's involved in making the overhaul to someone's driveway? Like, how, if I'm the homeowner, how long do I think should I be expecting for it to take? Well, the full conversion is quite intense in that we're removing the entire sub-base, because that, for a standard structure, you just have compacted gravel. But what we need to do is convert the whole base into what is essentially a gigantic French drain. We take out all of the gravel and replace it with filter stone, or clear stone, as it's known in the trades. The whole driveway base gets wrapped in a stiff biaxial grid, giving it very good structure. So it can take any kind of weight, and then you choose your design. You put, whichever interlock paver border you'd like, concrete around the perimeter, and you can do various designs. And then you choose a natural granite color for your pure paved surface or other permeable pavements that are on the market. Okay. Well, Taylor, thank you for calling. It was good to hear your take as well. We have Leslie on the line from Toronto. Hi, Leslie. We're asking today, as you know, as Ontario sees more intense and heavy rain, how are you adapting?
We have all three of our downspouts going into our gardens. The one at the back is not quite formally done as a rain garden, but I'd say it's a quasi-rain garden. We have permeable stones in our driveway, so the water is absorbed down through those, so nothing goes out onto the street. We have natural lawns front and back, and a big garden in the back when there are no paving boundaries between anything. So we've had no trouble, and I have to say, to be fair, we do live on a higher ground of sandy loam, but we do have a sump pump for backup. We have a back check valve for the sewer. When we bought the property, there were a lot of really nice trees. We've maintained them, and we've added to them. And what made you want to do that? Was there a time where you realized this is something that we really need to be prioritizing? Absolutely, because Toronto's had so many quite devastating floods lately, and what strikes me as confounding is how so many people are paving so much of their surface, and then they wonder why they're getting flooded. And it's bizarre, and we have a pretty hilly terrain here, so it's not uncommon for people to be on a slope. They've got to give some place to the water to go, or it'll be in their basement. Yeah, I'm picturing when I used to live in Toronto, there were people who would do the pave the front lawn as a parking pad, that kind of thing. Yes, there's that. There's also the narrow driveway turns into a big paved patio with a little strip of green instead of the other way around. That happens a lot, where people do their backyard, they just pave it or put down stones. And, of course, another radiant heat source, so not great with climate warming. All right. Well, thank you very much for calling, Leslie, with your input, your design ideas. We've got Kier on the line in Trenton. Hi, Kier.
Hi there. How's it going? Hi.
I'm wondering what you're thinking as you're listening to today's show.
I just want to thank you for taking my call and for bringing up the topic. I guess I'm kind of lucky where I live. I'm not on municipal septic or water, which is not really much of a choice, but it's kind of the preference for most people out here. And it's nice to hear like that the cities are trying to deal with the problems that they create themselves, as well as, you have to ask for assistance from sources sometimes. But the idea of like a sponge city is really interesting. But it also would be nice to acknowledge that like the surrounding areas that the cities are affecting are also partly to blame for this problem. So if we had like organic fields that we used to have with like the nice humus layer, and it's not just a field of sand with chemical inputs, and then all this water's rushing through with no proper soils, no proper wetlands, and then all this water has to rush through the Don Valley system, it seems like, and then causes all these problems. But if we were to acknowledge that just that there's a little bit more than just global warming or what we want to acknowledge as the problem, but that there's also these other things that have been going on for 20, 30, 40 years that are kind of creating this situation and making it worse, that it extends just outside the city's borders for sure.
Okay, thank you, Keir. We've got Paul Kovacs on the line. He is the Executive Director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at the University of Western Ontario. Keir was kind of alluding to some of this, and I have been wondering, we have to wrap shortly, but maybe there's an elephant in the room, Paul, around more and more rainfall happening. And are we really going to be able to keep up with it? What can you say to us as someone who studies climate change for some final thoughts?
Again, thank you for the opportunity, Kate, to be part of the show today, and and to the very many thoughtful callers who've called in and shared their success stories and their thoughts. It's my opinion that the science is showing that in a warming world, we're going to have more intense rain. We're also going to have more days when it's really dry and drought occurs, and other threats like wildfire threat in our country this year. But we're going to have more of these really strong rain events, and we need to be ready for them. We, meaning the municipalities who are setting up these systems, and what Dan Matheson shared was Stratford reviewed their system and took 20 years to build it up, so it's built to an even higher level than the minimums that people are expecting. So the community engineers, water management people at the community level know what to do. They just need to make that commitment and get council to give the funding so they can do the right thing.
Okay, thank you very much. Paul Kovacs is the Executive Director for the Institute for Catastrophic Loss Reduction at the University of Western Ontario. We're back tomorrow at noon.